All right. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So I'm not going to share my screen. I will just ask that everybody switch their view to the up in the right hand corner to speaker view. If you can go up to your up to that tab that says view and then hit speaker view. That should highlight the person that is talking, I believe. So and then what I'll do is flip my camera around and so you guys can see the exercises. But essentially, we will introduce our FIFA 11, well, not our, but the FIFA 11 injury prevention warm up. And we're just going to introduce parts 1 and part 3. So Paul Jenkins has shared the PDF version of that in the chat for everyone to download and look at if they want. There is a note section in the back, so if you want to add any notes after you print it off or anything, you can definitely do that. So a little bit of background: FIFA created the FIFA 11 injury prevention program, and they did a ton of research with European soccer players, and it has been shown to reduce injuries of
Good luck.
up to 50%.
Mute him.
Oh,
Sorry.
can we mute? Thank you. So yeah, reduces injuries up to 50%. So that is a pretty significant degree of reduction there. And by show of hands, if everybody can, raise their hand or put a thumbs up, how many of you guys have been affected by injuries with your team or in your playing career even? Yeah, so pretty significant. A lot of people raising their hands and saying, injuries are a big deal. So this program was built to be a warm-up, and all you really need to do is do it 2 times a week, 2 to 3 times a week, and it's shown to give significant injury reduction from that. So moving on to kind of the setup of everything. So I'll go ahead and try to flip my screen here. Paul, do you have anything else you wanted to add to kind of the summary of the program?
I think, yeah, the other points that I would make is that, when you look at the research behind it, the worst success it's ever had is about a 30% reduction in injuries. So I think that that's really pretty good odds, and you can get as much as potentially 50%. Other things is that it was designed to be very simple in terms of that, as Tom's going to show us when we get the layout of this, you don't need a lot of equipment. It doesn't take a lot of time. So it's something that once you do that, it really does just take getting the setup and going through it. The other point that I really want to make, though, is that it does really take a little bit of that mastery of technique. And that's where the coaches really come into play, is that they need to really be kind of monitoring and providing that feedback to the players that they're doing things correctly. Because if you do it incorrectly over and over again, you're just going to master how to do it incorrectly, and that will not really provide the same benefit.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. Let's see, I'm going to try to flip my screen. Can you guys see the field layout?
Yes, we can.
Okay,
Yes, thank
perfect.
you.
Okay, so it's pretty simple. All you need to do is set out some cones. They're going to be 6 yards apart, and you just want to set up 6 cones. So essentially you have a starting cone and then 5 cones after that every 6 yards. So that's 30 yards. It's just going to be a straight kind of lane, and your players will line up at either side of the cones, just like Brant and Paul are set up here. The very first exercise of the program is pretty simple. It's just an easy jog forward, and then they're gonna loop around the outside cone and jog a little bit quicker on the way back. So they'll do it again. And here you want to emphasize, knees and toes pointed forward, and good running form there. So pretty simple. You do each one of these, you do 2 times down and back on the 30 yards. So for each exercise, that's the regulation. Usually I tell teams once the player gets to the first cone, the next person can go. So it's really kind of rolling off the cuff, and you're not losing any time by talking or stopping or saying go and things like that. The next one is they're going to jog up. It's called hip out. So they're going to jog up. Once they get to the first cone, they're going to lift their knee up high and rotate their leg outward. So jog up, rotate outward, and then it's a nice easy jog back. So each cone is alternating knees. So knee up and out, knee up and out. The thing that you want to watch out for here is you want to make sure that their hips are level when they're rotating their hips out. So you don't want them to drop their hip or necessarily keep their knee down low. You want that knee nice and high so they're getting that full hip range of motion. The next one is the exact opposite of that. So it's hip in. So they're going to jog up to the first cone, hip in. So hip, knee up and out, and then bring it in. And same thing, you want to watch for those hips to drop. Make sure that their plant leg is also not rotating. So we want nice level knees, not rotation in the knees, nice level hips. And your plant leg toe should be pointed forward as well. So really it's all about form. As a coach, that's kind of your most significant role in this injury prevention warm-up, is teaching them the correct form. Then once they get the hang of it, you can roll right through this, and it's just a typical warm-up. And then as you go along, you can kind of critique. Then the next one is a shuffle, and they're going to shuffle around each other. So they'll jog up, shuffle in, go around each other, back to their original cone, jog up, shuffle in, around each other, back to the original cone, and so on and so forth. The biggest thing you want to watch for on here is, again, body alignment. So FIFA 11 preaches a lot about body alignment. So you'll hear me talking about that all night. You want to make sure the toes and knees are pointed forward. So you don't want them to kind of point their toe out towards the cone for the side that they're kind of dragging. So we'll show kind of a bad example. Paul, if you could jog forward and show how a shuffling with your toe sideways, yeah. So then let's say the ball change, you're defending a play in soccer and the ball changes directions. He's all screwed, his knee's all corkscrewed, and that's a good mechanism to hurt your knee. Yeah. So that's why you want to kind of preach toe and knee alignment there, and then it'll become second nature. So that's the biggest thing you want to look for there. The next one is just a progression from that. So it's going to be a jog forward, shuffle, and then they're going to actually jump and hit shoulders and then land on 2 feet. Shuffle back, jump, hit shoulders, and land on 2 feet. So obviously you want to watch for landing on 2 feet. You want to watch those toes and knees that they're pointed forward. And then also when they're jumping, make sure that their head is facing forward. So when a player goes up for the ball in soccer, they're not looking at the opponent, they're looking at the ball, right? So you want to kind of practice that kind of unknown contact, but you want to be ready for a two-legged landing and practice that as second nature. Okay, then the next one is somewhat of an acceleration and back pedal exercise. So they're going to go up 2 cones and then back pedal 1 cone. So they're going to accelerate up 2 cones, back pedal, accelerate up, and back pedal, and then finish with acceleration. Biggest thing here is, again, knee and toe alignment. And you want to make sure that the athlete's not looking backwards, because that actually changes their form when they're backpedaling. So if they're looking backwards, that's not really functional to the soccer game, right? When you're backpedaling and playing defense or trying to get a ball or something like that, you don't look backwards, you just backpedal. So we want to kind of teach that as second nature and critique their form there. You also want to make sure that they stay nice and low when they're backpedaling. So they're using their core and their quad strength as well. Okay, so that's kind of the end of part 1 of FIFA 11. Then it transitions into part 2, which is strength exercises. So tonight we're not going to go over these exercises. So part 1, 2, and 3 of this warm-up can be done during practice sessions, but part 1 and 3 can be done on game days. So we're showing you kind of the game day warm-up right now, but it's also all the running exercises. So it kind of goes part 1 running, part 2 strength, part 3 running. Okay. And there's a little bit of balance worked into strength as well. So the first exercise of part 3 is just the exact opposite of your very first exercise, and it's fast running down and then a nice easy jog on the way back. So they're going to start on the inside of the cone. You can say go, and then they run all the way down the field at about an 80 to 90% pace. Running down and loop around the outside of the cone, nice easy jog back. Running down. Same thing if somebody's really, has incorrect form when they're running with their toes out and, kind of kicking their legs up and stuff like that, then you want to address that and try to have them go cheek to cheek with their arms, knees nice and high, toes and knees pointed forward. The next one is a little bit, takes a few practice tries, but it's called bounding. So each athlete is going to take a few warm-up steps, and then they're going to go into almost like an exaggerated run where they're going to bound. So they're going to lift their knee nice and high, then bound to the next leg and lift that knee nice and high. So it's not a skip, but it's a bound. To some kids, I kind of describe it as like how Mario would kind of jump up in the air, but you're switching feet. So Brent will demonstrate here, take a few warm-up steps, and then go into the bound. So that was more of kind of a jump. So I'll critique Brant on this one. So Brant, do it all in succession. So from one foot to the next, you're bounding, and keep that knee nice and high. Okay. So a lot of players will do that actually on the first round. They'll kind of like jump and skip, but we don't want that. We want a bound. So the warm-up step. There we go. Perfect. That's much better. Okay, and then it's a nice easy jog on the way back there as well. So the very last one is a plant and cut. So they're going to do the same thing here. They're going to take a few warm-up steps, change direction, and then exaggerate kind of their cut and practice that cut, going all the way across the lane there and cutting. And it's a nice easy jog back. Here you want to emphasize that they're loading up on their leg and their knee isn't moving inward or rotating. So really loading up on that leg, putting their center of gravity right over that leg. And that is the final exercise for part 3. So then they can get a drink and move into practice. And one thing we really want to talk about is, you know, a lot of people spend time on their warm-ups right now. And typically with a team, this takes about 15 to 20 minutes. So if you're spending 10 minutes on your warm-up already, or if the players are warming up by themselves, you can easily add on 5 or 10 minutes. It's just 5 minutes, and you could potentially reduce 50% of your injuries. So we definitely want to, you know, put that into perspective that, you know, that's kind of an easy thing to do. Just add 5 minutes, take 5 minutes out of your practice to prevent injuries. And, you know, research has also shown that healthier teams actually perform better. So they have better records, they have more wins, and they're better teams, which makes sense logically, because if your players spend more time playing the game and on the field, they're going to be better at soccer. So, yeah, that's kind of our pitch, and we can kind of open it up to questions.
All right, thanks, Tom and Paul, for demoing that. I'm just checking the chat. I don't see any particular questions at the moment. We'll give everybody a couple of minutes to type in if they'd like to. I do have a couple of quick things for me, because we had some people that came in as the presentation started. So could you guys tell us again and just kind of recap? This was done with a study with using some athletes from Europe, and can you just give us a little bit of that again so that everybody can get that?
Yeah, sure. Paul, do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Actually, the long story short was that about 10 years ago, FIFA developed the FIFA 11, which was their first injury prevention workout, and it really didn't work. They had limited success with that. So then they kind of based some of their changes off the PEP program out of UCLA in California and added up to where they became the FIFA 11 Plus, which is about 15 exercises to it. And what they did was then they studied that with a group of athletes, initially over in Europe and then in Brazil. And what they found was that they had significant reduction in injuries in those athletes that were doing it compared to those that had not. Since then, it's been studied in over 1,000 different scientific research articles, both in soccer, but also in basketball. NCAA men's basketball actually did a study with it. It's been studied in various sports, and every single time it comes up with a significant reduction in injuries with the people that are doing it twice a week. Sorry, I'm a little bit out of breath still.
So you can see that it gets the kids' heart rates up for sure while they're doing that. And did you mention earlier, Paul, that it was about a 30% reduction?
So in the worst studies that we've seen, the worst results are about a 30% reduction. Best case scenario in some of the studies have shown as much as a 50% reduction in injuries and a 55% reduction in serious injuries like ACL.
Okay, fantastic. And would you guys recommend 2 reps of each one of those exercises? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, fantastic. We did have a question pop in from Kirk and asking if you guys could share some thoughts about static stretching.
Yeah, so static stretching is obviously a good thing, but we typically reserve that for after practice or after games. And then if you can couple that with foam rolling as well, that's shown to increase flexibility. I think a study came out maybe a couple summers ago. Correct me if I'm wrong, Paul. Paul's got a memory for all the facts and studies and stuff, but yeah, essentially it said coupling both static stretching and foam rolling together significantly increases flexibility. So we like to add the static stretching in at the end of exercise and more dynamic warm up for the beginning of exercise.
Yeah, and I'd like to
Okay.
just add on to that static stretching, as well, it has been very well shown to increase flexibility. It's also been shown to have a transient or a temporary reduction in terms of muscle force output. So if you do that before your game or before your practice, there's going to be about a 10% reduction in terms of their strength, which is not something you really want to get while you're out there trying to have them work out really hard.
Okay, so static stretching is better afterwards, doing the dynamic prior to the competition.
Exactly.
Okay, fantastic. Another question popped in from Michael. Thoughts on cool downs? And maybe we kind of just answered that. Would you recommend something like this, what you just showed us and demoed, as part of a cool down?
No, I think cool down can be, a nice easy jog for a couple minutes, and then add in that static stretching. Make sure you're hitting all areas of the body, not just lower extremities, but core and lower back and even upper extremities as well, because athletes also use their upper extremities when they're running and playing soccer and all that stuff too. So.
Okay. Another one popped in regarding the attachments with the exercises. Are they attached to the Zoom meeting? So I guess the attachment that you put in earlier, Paul, is all of this in there, the information?
It should be, but sometimes when people enter the meeting after the attachment's been added, they won't have it because they won't have been in the chat yet. So I can go ahead and add it again.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see, I think we've got another one. On part 2, strength plyometrics, do you have a guidance regarding the age to introduce these and then the frequency?
Yeah, so for part 2, we typically advise that this should be 13 to 14 and up. It can be taught to 12-year-olds as well, but really you only need 2 times per week to see a significant reduction. So those are really focused on core strength, eccentric contractions. So an eccentric contraction is essentially a contraction while the muscle is getting longer. So if you think about it, like concentric is getting shorter, eccentric is getting a little bit longer. So there's a good eccentric hamstring exercise in there that really reduces the rate of hamstring injuries. We also focus on balance in there, and then plyometrics as well. So a little bit of jumping, explosive movement to kind of get the blood flowing in that way as well. So those are kind of the guidance for strength training for part 2. There is a younger version of this program as well. It's just the FIFA 11 for youth. And we didn't talk about that tonight, but we can definitely set up another meeting to kind of go over that. That essentially consists of 7 exercises, and it teaches kids how to balance, core strength, how to start to do functional movement, and then also how to fall. So all important things for younger kids. So that's more of like the 7 to 11 age group.
That's great. You actually answered one of the next questions. Is there a program for the youth players? So there is one out there, and is it also titled FIFA 11 for youth?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's see if there's anything else. Are there stretches that are more designated for male versus female? I know female players have a higher chance of severe knee injuries. And if so, are there more of a strengthening for the female players at an earlier age?
So there's not necessarily like stretches, but like we talked about during the program, you really want to focus on where that knee is in relation to the hip and foot. So with female athletes, they are more prone to injury, especially severe knee injuries. But if you can kind of teach body alignment and strengthen some of the core and glutes and hips to have that alignment during unexpected movements, then that reduces that injury risk significantly. So really harping on that form and technique is what you want to go for.
Okay, great. Another
And I just
question
added
came
the
in.
PDF for the kids version as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Paul. Another question came in regards to halftime. Sometimes the kids, depending on the level, they may get between 5 and 10 minutes of halftime break. What are your thoughts there? How can we best get the athletes ready to re-engage?
So yeah, I would just plan maybe a 1 to 3 minute dynamic warm up at the end of your halftime. So maybe let them get a drink, recover, talk to them about the first half, game strategy, stuff like that. Then for the last couple minutes of the game, throw in a dynamic warm up. So not necessarily like running drills from the FIFA 11, but where they're moving and moving their limbs around to where they are stretching their muscles a tiny bit. So an example of that is probably the hip out exercise. That you don't necessarily have to set up running there, but you can do a hip out. That's more of a dynamic stretch to kind of open up the hips. So that's an example.
Okay, great. Another one came in at the high school level where players are playing up to 3 games per week. Would there be a different set of dynamic movements for a recovery type session that you do with them? Because that is an issue with high school sports, soccer in particular. They will play 3, sometimes 4 games in a week.
Yeah. So for recovery, I don't think that the FIFA 11 would fit the bill of recovery. I think that it's definitely on the higher end of intense for a warm up. If you're looking for recovery sessions, you would definitely want to look at definitely low heart rate, dynamic movements. I know some teams have had success with certain things like yoga and, getting into kind of a routine where they can relax and let their stresses go away and let their body recover. So I understand that with high school sports and the limited amount of time that's not necessarily always the case, but as far as recovery go, that's probably a whole nother topic that we could talk about on a different night as well.
And I think when we originally spoke, Tom, that was one of the topics that I thought would be great to do. So maybe in the upcoming weeks, we could line one of those up because, from a recovery standpoint, I mean, there's multiple things. Diet, sleep is extremely important. The type of load that we're doing in activities, allowing the body to recover the 72 plus hours that it needs from a maximum output. So definitely a topic that I think would be great for all of us to hear. And yeah. I'll look forward to setting one of those up so that we can let everybody know we'll do a recovery Zoom webinar as well.
Sounds good. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that. There's a lot of different factors, and definitely diet, nutrition, and sleep played big roles in that as well. Yeah.
One other thing I'd like to add on to that is that's one of the real advantages of starting this in the preseason. So that because it does take a while before you really develop that full level of effectiveness, so that if you start in the preseason, get this going, that way when you come to the really hardcore season, you can kind of back off on your workouts a little bit better because you've built up that resiliency.
Sure. I know my daughter's in a high school and they've got about a 3-week preseason. And then when April comes, they will have probably 14 games in the month of April. And it's just a really serious load on them. Not something that's beneficial. So we have to be very careful with those players and making sure that they get the proper recovery and as best as we possibly can. We did have another question pop in. Are you familiar with the ramp warm-up and what do you think about it? Ramp, R-A-M-P.
I am not familiar with that, so I cannot speak to that. Paul, are you?
I'm going to join in with you. No, that's not one that I'm familiar with either. So it's not been in a lot of the scientific literature.
Okay. Well, I'm just taking one more look through. Would you be able to provide, we're going to put the recording up on our website. Can we get the attachments as well from you gentlemen? We can put those up and include those on the website?
That would be fine.
Yeah, that'd be great, because we've got some people on the phone and they can't get the docs. So we'll go ahead and do that for everybody. Give us within the next 48 hours, we'll have this loaded onto our website. And if you have any problems finding it, you certainly can contact me at the MICE office, but we'll put it up there for everybody. I think that concludes. We've got all the questions that I saw in there answered, and we're right at 35 minutes. I want to thank Tom and Paul both for sharing your expertise and willingness to help us keep our athletes healthy. Every little bit helps, and anytime we can educate ourselves and pass that on to the kids, it's great. So thank you, and there's a bunch of thank yous coming in the chat box, so I think it was appreciated. And Tom, Paul, anything else before we say goodbye?
I just want to reiterate the thank you to you guys for setting this up. And I want to also thank Brant, who came out here to help us with the demonstration, because he didn't get a whole lot of credit for it, but we would have never been able to do it without him.
Thank you, Grant. I appreciate that too.
All right. Well, thank you for having us. And yeah, hopefully we can set up some more of these and talk about some more topics and, keep our athletes healthy.
Sounds fantastic. We will we'll be in touch, Tom and Paul. Thank you, and everybody have a great evening. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll see you hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
All righty. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.